Hello, everybody, and welcome to our live talk on Sunday morning. I'm very glad to have Neil and Veronika and Kacy here. Priya will show up later, and Sequus too. We are missing Gautam today. We are missing Dietmar and Dennis because they have other very important things to do. But Sek will jump in about an hour and tell us about the African point of view on separation, which is the topic today. And I would ask you to introduce yourself a bit and then we start.
Good morning.
How about you, Veronika?
Yes. My name is Veronika Danzer-La. I'm living in Trinidad and Tobago since 2006. So a good while now. I'm from South Germany and I am 50. I'm almost 50 years old. And I have been working and living with animals and special people who are diagnosed with Asperger's and autism and Down syndrome, but also, people who come through our organization who need mental well-being. We have been offering free frontline worker workshops throughout the pandemic, which was very, very interesting. And yeah, we all need well-being. We all need relaxation. And, we offer it outside with our beautiful family members, the animals. And we have been very successfully the last 15 years doing so in Tobago.
Thank you. In Tobago. It's so nice to have somebody from Tobago here, somebody from Germany, somebody from Australia, and we are waiting for the African and Indian participants. I love it.
Mm.
It also shows how we are tied together internationally in this world as people who have chosen to be kind of, how can I say this, have chosen to work with other individuals to help them into their own strengths. And I love the fact that horses are used. I'm a horse and dog fanatic. I love cats also, but I must say my heart opens with both horses and uh, dogs. And I know one thing, in the United States, they actually have horses that go into nursing homes as therapy animals. That was something that I was quite surprised with given the size. But and the ponies are being used more. So there's something that ties us together throughout the history of being humans here on the earth, that dogs and horses and cats as those who accompanied us, but they've been a part of our human history for so many years. There's sort of an attachment there and a soul connection of some sort without getting too esoteric on that. But I love the fact that you work with horses and people and kids and all of that. And
Thank you, Kacy.
yeah,
Neil?
Neil, I'm in West Australia, originally from New Zealand, and funny we're talking about horses and horses helping. I live out in the countryside, reasonably in the countryside anyway, and there's a paddock next to me where a horse often is, and I sit here. I'm outside under cover, so it doesn't matter whether it's raining or anything. And I sit here out here all year. And in the paddock next door to me is this horse. And when I'm working with patients, the horse will come up to the fence and look at me when I'm failing to actually understand what's going on. So it peers over the fence and just eyeballs me. Absolutely eyeballs me. And so I ask it, like, what am I missing? What is it that I'm misunderstanding here with this client that I'm working with? They might be in Germany, and we're talking over the Zoom or something of that nature, and the horse knows that I'm making the mistake. And every time the horse leads me to a much better way of actually viewing what's going on. So that's my horse story. I don't even know what the horse's name is. It's good fun though.
This is the interesting thing when we are talking about separation anxiety, and at the same time we see this absolute interconnectedness throughout the world with our speakers, with the horse who is teaching you how to better interact with the clients, which the horse never saw, but gets the energy.
Hmm.
And somehow it knows.
Oh, it absolutely knows. It knows that I'm making a fool of myself and I'm going in the wrong direction. And it comes up to the fence, looks at me, and it will not budge until I recognize what I need to actually be doing. Every time.
So interesting.
He's my boss.
Mm-hmm. Why not?
That's right. Anyway, that's me.
Mm-hmm. Kacy, please introduce yourself.
Certainly.
Short.
Thank you. My name's Kacy Crystal-Spörer. I'm an American who's been living here in Germany for about 40 years. I've been married almost 40 years also to a German, and I found out in 2016, I figured out for myself that many of the issues that I've been dealing with in my life were such that I suddenly realized that I have an ADHD brain. It's no wonder that I don't always fit into normal society. Since then, I've had training. I'm a certified ADHD coach, and my husband and I have set up both a coaching center and an academy to teach others here in the German-speaking realm the beauty of becoming an ADHD coach. Most people who come to us also have ADHD, which is a great advantage because it means we can say with the clients who come to us, I understand where you're coming from. Let's learn how to work with it better. So we become partners in that sense. I don't know how to put it. It's like we don't lead the partners, we support them in going in their own direction. And that I think is the most important thing to do often in life, in coaching with humans as such, because there is a spirit that guides every one of us, even if it's taken us into the depths of fear, anxiety, of a non-functioning. And if we can help them find their way back to their own sense of having a portion of themselves that can guide themselves and trust within themselves, then they can go on and live their lives. We don't determine how someone else can heal. We give them a space where they can trust enough that we can explore that together and they know they're not alone. So that's essentially the aspect that I come to this discussion with. And with ADHD, part of the results of having an ADHD brain can well be, it doesn't have to be, that people tend to fall into anxiety, negative thinking. Depression is the top misdiagnosed situation for people who have ADHD. They come to us with years of diagnosis for fear, for anxiety, and for depression. And then they suddenly realize that those were just because they felt out of place. And it's all
Definitely.
so I'm glad that we're here in any event. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So from your different point of views, what would you say is the basis of separation anxiety? Maybe Veronika, you could start because you have the viewpoint on horses and humans and cats and dogs.
Maybe I can start with an example. Yesterday, I went to a friend of mine who invited me since many months to come to her place where she has horses. She has horses. It's a private place, but people tend to be drawn there as like a magnet. And when I went to her, it's actually a horse breeding farm where they breed where they breed race horses. And I found those horses in small kennels, stables, we call them. People are drawn to go to the horses and touch them. And I see them, and I see first the pain they're going through because they are living in those small stables. And I see the people's pain as well, because sometimes people live that same life. They put themselves in a small, small space. They don't see all the freedom they have. I learned later on that the horses are in the stables only 7 hours, and then all 40 horses are being let out. And I was so glad to see that. So they opened up all the barns, and young foals, 2 weeks up to older horses, 28, 30, all came out and united on a space, maybe 40 acres underneath trees in nature. And even while I talk about this, my heart opens up. And I just wish that people would see that and witness that, because it's such an heart opener for people with anxiety, for people with depression. When they see that, just like Neil, you would see that horse over the fence who talks to you from far away, half a mile, talks to you and feels you and helps you to be balanced, to be the guide for your client, which is on the phone, maybe from Germany. This is the power of the horses. This is the power of nature, and this is the power of animals. And it is now time to really claim, maybe not to claim, to understand that this is their mission, and that this is their work they have for us freely to give. They have such a great gift for the world, and they have such a great healing power. So separation anxiety for us at Healing and Being with Horses, we have special needs, but also we have high-end client, people who come from Trinidad, from the industrial island where there is so much money. They come to us to be with the horses. And we have been witnessing so many beautiful things where the person maybe comes to initially book a ride with the horse, but then when the horse actually comes to the person freely, because the horse just wants to connect, the person starts to cry, the person starts to let go, the person finally gets softened in their heart. So separation anxiety has to do something with tension. I am tense, and I know it from myself. I can speak from my own experience, and I think that is why I'm also led to work the way I'm working with people, because I have been there. I have been, maybe not diagnosed, but I have been, and I can feel what people go through. And the horses are the facilitators, the horses are the therapists, and I'm the guide, just like you, Katie, and just like you, Neil, just like you, Anne-Marie, mentoring so many people, and with your intuition.
Veronika, I think it works so in such a strong fashion because of you. You are a beacon in essence that can help that occur, because as we're all aware, there are horses all over the world, and they may well be open to connection, but unfortunately, because we as humans often mistreat our animals, even if it's unknowingly, by keeping, for example, keeping them in the stall the whole day. I think it's wonderful that they allow racehorses out in fields. That surprised me. But it's people can't expect that it will happen automatically. It's like we need a guide, or we need a translator, or we need someone to be there. Children have a different ability there to connect because they don't know that it's unusual. But I think the work that you are doing and what you said was very important. Because you've been there, you can provide a bridge that others can then become aware of. Let's put it that way. And I think it's important that we as coaches don't think that we have to be perfect, or we have to be fully blessed with transcendent power, but that we acknowledge that it is our human history that allows us to build the bridge to people who are also suffering, and to give them the hope that they can find their ways. The animals are very supportive. I know with ADHD, one of the main suggestions that we give almost everyone is, if it's at all possible in their life, to have a, an animal that they interact with regularly, whether it's a cat or a dog, or, as far as I'm concerned, there are people who communicate with fish or with any living being. And birds can be the same thing. And yes, that reminds us of the spirit that binds us all. But the fact that you are there with your history makes the biggest difference. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Kacy. I would like to welcome Priya. Thank you for being here. We were talking about separation anxiety, Priya, and we were first touching the topic of animals and how easy it is for humans to connect with animals, and with animals to connect with humans, and about the cages we put animals in, which mirror ourselves in caging. And then we are separated. And that animals can break down that separation much more easy than a human being. And then we can feel it again, this connectedness. Whereas I would say this is mainly mirroring a childhood trauma. And it's, for me, it's being stuck in a childhood stage if you're not able to connect and feel separated. What would you say?
Well, I think man is by inherent nature a social animal. So our desire to connect with other people and to have meaningful interactions with them is one of the most basic necessities that we have, along with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So when there are impediments in that for various reasons, I think human beings suffer a lot because of that lack of social connect, or have meaningful conversations, or to be able to exchange ideas, or even the way that we are meeting right now. I think it is, in spite of everything, I wanted to be there because, and I'm apologetic about my tardiness, but there is a personal thing happening in the background, but I still wanted to be there because I really enjoy my interactions with Marianne and with all of you. And Marianne and I, we speak almost every weekly. So it's, we have a connection that, sometimes I think of her and she messages, or, so that's a very beautiful connection. I have something like what Veronika perhaps or Neil has with the animals, and, they're able to communicate with them. As far as separation anxiety and, the human condition per se, if we have to speak about that, then I think that if I look at it from the developmental point of view, then those who are infants inside, or let's say that their infancy needs have not been well met, So the infancy is the time when you get unconditional love, care, and attention from your primary caregiver. And if for some reason that unconditional love, care, and attention is not given by the primary caregiver, whoever it be, the most important, caregiver is, of course, the mother. So, digressing a little, we know that human beings, because of our upright nature, are born 9 months earlier, perhaps, than other animals or simians who have a sort of more stoop posture, so their pelvis can accommodate a growing um, infant. And we, because of our upright posture, have to give birth because the pelvic canal cannot then accommodate the widest diameter. So this means that although we look at infants as separate people or separate entities, the first 9 months or the first year in the mother's arms is when massive development is also happening. Everything that should have probably happened inside the mother's womb is actually happening outside. So it's a very critical period of time where this unconditional love, care, attention, nurture is extremely important. If for some reason that mother or that primary caregiver is not able to do that, or worse still, abandons or cannot accept that infant, and even if there is somebody else who can take up this, but that period of abandonment and that feeling of not being accepted by your mother, psychologically speaking, even they consider the mother and child as one unit till the age of 7. So there is an invisible umbilical cord that ties us to our mothers, even till the age of 7. So you can imagine that if this early care is not given, then that person is somewhere their energy pattern or there is a fault in the infancy part of them. And while for the outer world, they can be very, very successful in whatever they do, when it comes to the infancy range of issues to do with eating, to do with feeling secure, to do with feeling loved unconditionally, to do with feeling accepted, to do with finding one's place in a group of people, which is what infancy is about. Like if the mother is busy, somebody or the other will come and pick up the crying infant and comfort them and find out, is he hot, is he too cold, has he pooped, has he peed, does he need a change, is he thirsty, is he hungry? So instinctively we do it. So somewhere this feeling of comfort is what then we lack in our adult lives, and they can manifest as various illnesses. It can be metabolic disorders that are to do with feeling satiated or feeling that I've had enough to eat, or it can be to do with body image issues, that I'm loved enough and that I am enough and that this body is perfect and that there's nothing wrong with it, and that so this is how it can manifest. Or it can manifest as anorexia or bulimia, or it can manifest as an actual separation disorder and anxiety, wherein adult people, as adults, they are bonded to one particular person or place or structure that gives them that feeling of comfort or belonging or unconditional love, and they're unable to function when that structure goes away. It can be the death of a mother, it can be the death of a partner who's providing care like a mother or a nurture. It can be a system that they are part of. It can be a job that nourishes them. And then, when that abrupt separation happens, they develop, even without that abrupt separation happens, they can have feelings that tomorrow, if this goes away, what will I do? How will I survive? I won't be able to survive. I will be, I'll be overcome with all these things. I won't be able to be in the outside world. I won't be able to function in a very, very elemental way, that which will give you themes of infancy. How will I eat? Who will look at me? Who will look after me? Uh, who will care for me if this person goes away tomorrow, or if this structure disappears, or if I leave this house? Who's going to look at me? How will I survive? So these will be the things that they will face. And then we understand that it is to do with the infancy, some issue with the infancy. So, and then we are able to understand that the remedy that we choose has to have a big footprint in the infancy area.
Definitely.
And then we know that it's going to work very well. It has to have a big footprint with the abandonment issues. Then we know that it matches very well for us, for this individual in front of us. It has to do with feeling secure by being part of, or being cared for, or being nourished for by somebody like a maternal figure. And then if that remedy has that big part footprint, then we know that it will work for this patient. So then that's how we understand, and that's how we map in a very, very short way.
Thank you, Priya. Neil?
Look, I just am in awe of your summary there, Priya. It's absolutely incredible. The thing that was really being stimulated as you were, running through your discourse, was the issue of separation that occurs for the mother.
Mm-hmm.
And when the when I'm working with patients and working with women who have children themselves, it's so common to actually see that they've had no real way of actually being able to connect into their own children, and which will undoubtedly have been connected to all of the things that you're talking about for that woman when she was a child, as an infant herself, and the reminder that you gave us there, I'm sure it's something that we've all contemplated, but that idea that we're actually born way too early, like humans are extraordinarily complex beings, particularly the brain structures and so on, and next to none of it's actually fully developed when you're born. There's almost none of it that's actually operating. One little element that's in there, and so I'd like us to have a look at this business of the separation that the mother feels with the child. In other words, the mother actually is in a separation state because they just don't know how to be connected with their child. So I'd love us to be able to actually sort of explore that a little bit. But another element that goes with the fact that we are born too early is that I observe, and particularly given that humans are so extraordinarily competent, particularly with their intelligence, with their intellect, the stuff to do with the brain. And what I observe is that the children, in a wholesome way, when they're in a wholesome sort of situation, the child will basically borrow the intellectual function of their parents, either their mother or their father or both. And they'll literally psychically, in some way, actually entrain the intelligent processes that are going on while their own brains are actually developing. As we all know, they don't fully develop until you're 20 years old, which as an animal is just ridiculous, ridiculously slow. So that would be something that I'd like to just throw into the pot, is that we have this capacity to actually be connecting. Like if everything's going well, then there is this and there is connection. So if everything's going well and there is connection between the parents and the child, or even the child and the teacher at school, however it works, other significant adults, could be grandparents or whatever, then there is a different type of opportunity for community to actually occur in that relationship that's going on between the adults and the children. So that's a bit of a long, rambling sort of a thing. It's really, it's full of questions. I'm actually asking questions. I'd like to hear, everybody's opinions on what we're talking about. But it just strikes me that the separation in the other direction, the way in which the adult feels separated from the child, is a really significant issue for us as practitioners of all of the work, the different kinds of work that we're all doing.
I think I can help a bit with that. When we are talking about heart rate variability and the measurement of the heart rate variability, we have one phenomenon. When a mother breastfeeds or has the child in the arm, and the mother loves the child, then the heart rate variability of the mother and the child sinks. And not only that, even the EEG waves of the mother sync to the heart rate variability of the child. gives that feeling of connectedness. And this is what people experience when they go to a horse. Suddenly,
Okay.
the heart rate variability of the human and the horse sinks, and that gives the feeling of connectedness. And if we don't experience this sinking of the heart rate variability, we feel tremendously lonely.
Good point.
So we can actually measure it if we want. And I think that people who feel so separated, they're always looking for that place which they might have had with the mother or didn't experience with the mother, or maybe only in pregnancy experienced, that the hearts did sink. And if they meet a person in their life, an adult person, and it happens while being in love, where the hearts easily sink, then they can't get let go of that person, not even for a minute, because they're still thinking of finally somebody provides what I would have wanted with my mother.
Yes, I think so. That's true. We say that this or that person gets me. They instinctively get me. And then we touch the heart, or we say that it was as if we always knew each other. It can be a friend or somebody else. And immediately they are in sync. I'm in sync with them and they're in sync with me. And this is what we instinctively say. And with animals, I think it's because they receive us with no ego.
Mm-hmm.
And they receive us completely from the heart chakra. And this is the reason why animals don't speak. They don't have prejudices like us. They don't have social constructs, ego, that I have to do this or achieve this or be there or this. We feel this hierarchy with them. Animals innately don't have a hierarchy with us. So they just receive us as we are. We have classified them into predators and prey. They understand that they have specific predators and that either they're a predator or a prey, eat or be eaten. They understand that at a very elemental level. But we have made the constructs that, okay, the horse is an animal that is like this, or, this is the pecking order. So for them, innately, they only know that the way that we treat them, and most of them receive us as we are. So, and heart rate variability will be a very technical way of proving that, or as a proof for that, or so.
Yeah. There's no judgment and there is only unconditional love. They don't see us as white, black. When I go, well, to a horse, I see the horse or white. I see the horse small or big. I see the horse in my brain start ticking. And this is so true, what you say, Priya. Yeah. The animals are there receiving us purely, not judgmental, unconditionally, as we are, with separation anxiety or not. They just love us.
Yes.
They love us if we are depressed. They love us if we are happy. They just take us as we are. And like an open flower, and yeah.
It's interesting that man and horse have had a long and very tortuous relationship. Horses have been part of all the wars that man has waged with other men. They have never understood why we needed to wage war and why all that bloodshed and violence and noise and running and galloping and all of that happened, but they were still part of it with us. And so the horse's desire to be useful is the most important thing that comes up even in the proving. And that they are innately very, very, very sad, not sad, they're innately, they feel, sad is, a vanilla word for it. And the most unhappy creature from inside was what the proving brought out. and that strong desire to please the one person whom they see as their master, and the desire to be useful. So these are the three rubrics that come up even in Nancy Herrick's Lack Equine Proving, which was made from the milk of mare. So
That makes them such a good soldier.
yes. So they never knew why we wanted to gallop across battlefields and kill other men, but they went along with us. So then they still can't understand why we need them to do a steeplechase, but they will still do it if the rider. Actually, Desmond Morris has also a very nice book about horse watching, and wherein the horse's eye is actually at the side, and it has a very incredibly detailed field of vision, and even the ears can move in all directions, all over. But when you put blinker the horse, then the horse has to rely completely on your judgment of where something is, where a jump is coming up, where a hedge is coming up, where trees are coming up, and so they're in sync with the rider. When the rider tenses up before a jump is when they know that they have to jump. They can't actually see it. So because the thing covers completely, the blinkers cover them completely. And hence, the whip is like as if an animal is coming to bite them at the back, at the flank.
Mhm.
So then they're instinctively running away from that. They're galloping away from that. So in the wild, horses can't really run so fast, gallop for such long distances at an end. The way that we see in these Regency movies that they're just galloping for hours. In the wild, the horses just like to graze and be with the mares and be with their group. And once in a while, they would like to, you know, gallop for a short distance and then fling their heads, and, you know, that's it. That's the enjoyment that they have. But we have converted them completely into these running machines, and even ads for men's virility have horses, stallions on them. So the horse is not about that. So Desmond Morris has a very nice book about horse watching. As an aside, as a big tangent I've taken off. I've galloped away.
Veronika, you should send Priya one of the videos you did send me with the horses galloping along the beach and then jumping in the water and swimming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful.
I just feel the pull of mentioning something. Thank you, Priya, again, because it's so inspirational for my work. So also what you say, Katy, about the beacon of light, when we go through our valleys and we had our experience and we have our anxiety and we have our ADHD and I was thinking about the horses we are in having in our family who went through the racing industry. A friend of mine just adopted a 33-year-old quarter horse who has been working as a police horse for 30 years. And I saw the horse yesterday from a very long distance, from far away. And for me, that horse looked so whole. She rescued that horse 6 months ago. And that horse for me is a beacon of light. That horse actually is giving so much to that lady who rescued this horse. The horse have such a strong, they are also strong within themselves. It is unbelievable. You can't break them like people feel broken. They are the healers. It just came to me while you were speaking, Priya. There is a horse who is 33 years old and was in the police force for so long and is now rescued and is shining and is now finally able to do its work. But because he went through so much, that's why he can even shine more. Do you know what I mean, Marianne?
But isn't
Yes,
that
a traumatized animal that learns to trust again is the best of all healers. That
That's
happens with strays and traumatized animals when they come to the right person. They just connect to the divine, they heal, they learn to trust again. And then it's fantastic what they can do for other beings.
This is true. The experience of having an animal that has never known anything but a good home and good people, and the experience of an animal that has known bad experience with people, which exists everywhere, and then they come to a place where they're treated well. The the gifts are, as you say, Marianne, it's stunning what they then are capable of giving. But that's also true of each of us. If we've come through all of the difficulties in our lives, we can relate to other people quite differently, should we choose, once again, to follow that beacon of light.
Mm.
And we have to be very careful not to romanticize the role of horses and dogs and cats, and well, primarily dogs, because cats, you can't use them in that sense. Animals get used and they get treated badly. And one thing that we don't tend to have with animals like dogs is that we don't tend to just, as a matter of course, sell and resell them, which does happen with horses. And I don't know how they manage that, but once again, if they come to a spot where someone understands, feels, and has that heart synchronicity, they do, you can do wonders with them. This is very true. But they do heal. But look at the fact that as people get older, their children grow up, and in the societies today, although Priya may be different in India because of the family orientation, but here in the West, or at least where I know it, the kids grow up and they move away, and they're 2 hours away, 5 hours away, or they're the other side of the world. And as people get older and their partners die or they go to this split, what they usually need is an animal because they need that heart resonance. And it's why in now these days in nursing homes, they will often have primarily cats because you don't have to take as much personal care of them as you do with a dog. But you have all of these animals that are there, and they're finding that people get along with their own lives much better if they have that connection somehow with young children, with children who have been abused. Once again, the animal therapy is there, but we are using these animals. And yes, given the love, they are open to the ability to forget, forgive. It's crucial, but we can't keep in mind that we do have to keep in mind that the role that animals play in our lives is often one of being used. And it's a balance. We can't idealize it too much.
Yeah, and then that is what the animals, what makes the animals sick, actually.
Well, it's true. I mean, look at the work of someone like Temple Grandin, who is she's my age. She's very autistic, and she revolutionized the entire industry having to do with the treatment of cattle used for food so that the cattle going into the slaughterhouses can stay in a calm fashion with their herd, and that I'm sorry, when they are killed, that it's done in such a way that they die instantly in the best scenario. But this one woman revolutionized the whole trade because she had the other people understand that it was financially better to have calm animals that cooperated with what you were doing. And it's all communication with the animals. And if we're going to be using animals, as we have used horses in war, dogs in war, yeah, bombs, I mean, we use them now, today also. We do our best to care for them also. But the whole thing is to respect life, period. And to understand that we need this heart connection, whether it's with people or with animals. Some people can't relate to people because of their the ways of living. But there's nothing like having a cat cuddle up to you at night and sleep, or a dog. You don't
Mm.
tend to do that with horses, although there are children who have done that. There are people who in the worst throes of whatever trauma they're going through, where they will go into a stall or a place where the horses are, and they will be there because it heals. This is correct. Doesn't take anything away from the animal either. But they didn't come here to do that. They are willing to do that.
Mm.
It works the other way around as well. I once had a horse which suffered from borreliosis and was totally allergic to antibiotics.
Mm.
And in the most critical night, I stayed with the horse in the stable, having the head of the horse on my lap. And I said, we are going through this together. It works the other way around as well.
Mm.
The animal can trust the human, and even if it is a vet,
Mm.
and you have this heart resonance, it's healing.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Neil?
Neil, what you haven't spoken in a while to any of this. How do you see this?
Well, I completely agree with what Marianne was saying there about the pathology that sits in an animal. It's nearly always connected to the pathology that's going on with the humans. And at time, it's very, very interesting what came out of Priya's introduction there is that issue of how, the pathology that's sitting inside the mother or the father is impacting the child. In other words, they're actually acquiring the pathology or the inclination towards the pathology, at least anyway, or the impetus to do so. And it's the same kind of thing. So, like, I'm sure all of you have observed, as I have, the way in which parents use their children. So, they completely use them. it's a consumption. So the parents end up consuming their children because they need whatever it is that the child is actually providing from the perspective of connection and perhaps the trauma of the child, the person, the adult, the human needs that sort of profile as well. So, when you're talking, Kacy, about the idea of, that we're using these animals, the exact same thing is happening with humans as well, and particularly children. And, like I was so intrigued by Priya's introduction there that, the logic of it, the absolute, critical logic of, the build-up of the situation. But you can see every way you turn the pathology that actually comes out of it. It's just everywhere. It's just remarkable, the actual whole process. One of the things I did also want to mention was that, I observe a sort of a cycle, as I've talked about before, with anxiety. And anxiety is sort of step 3. And it begins by consumption or some sort of a manic element. Then it becomes depressed and separated. And so to me, the separation actually occurs first. So, you're slow, you're overwhelmed, there's too much going on. And so therefore you actually have to separate to manage yourself. And then the anxiety picks up. Now, when you've got a person, like who has this kind of childhood trauma, that is happening, then it's a very, very significant issue that the anxiety itself will have this very, very specific sort of connection to what I would think of as being a depressed type of thing. Now, I'm also aware, Kacy, of what you're talking about, and I know how you get these misdiagnoses around anxiety and depression when really it's ADHD or ADD even. So either way, like no matter how you actually put that together. Sorry, Priya. Did you want to say something, Priya?
Yes, no, I was just saying a quick bye. I've put it in the chat box. I was just waiting for
Okay.
Maria to pick up and wave to her.
Thank you for having Priya.
Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much.
Thanks, Priya. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, so that interaction, at least in any case, between the health promoting element of separation. So in other words, when you're overwhelmed and you just have to separate because you can't cope with all of this stuff. Now, if we're thinking about those children who are in a relationship with a mother who's crazy or a father who's crazy or whatever it is, and they can't take it, like they just can't at all. And I've had many of these conversations with Marianne about different people, and even in our own experiences as well. And like it is a need. You need to actually separate. And but it is sad. Like it's got all of that sadness and depression type of elements associated with it. And then eventually you feel as though you've got to get on top of it. And that's when the anxiety will kick in. So it literally comes out of the fact that I can't carry on like I am, separating in this way. But if the separation is actually caused, is the cause for the anxiety, then it's a whole different story. So, I just want to throw that into the ring as well. And just see what you guys have got to say on the topic.
It's very true. If you have a parent that doesn't give you coherence but misuses you to get coherent herself or himself, then it's major emotional and energetical abuse. And as a child, you have to separate. And then you are alone. And then you might get frightened. Or you turn to an animal if you're lucky and have an animal around. But one point is that this is a major kind of abuse that doesn't leave bruises. You can't even show it to somebody. And still it makes a major impact on the child.
Isn't that usually also involved, though, with parents who are terrified to not have that role? The overly protective parents, where there's really no separation with the child, and yet the purpose is that children can grow and become their own adults. But we don't have a society where we have a rite of passage anymore. And even with 50, 60-year-old people, they're still talking about their mommy and their daddy. And it's still part of it that they feed them with emotion, because the parents haven't been able to develop fully lives where they have other relationships, other animals, other people in their lives. We have a lot of things going on with the fear of this separation is rampant in all directions. It's not just the children to the parents. But the question is, what do we do with it? How can we work with people to help them understand what's going on, to help them to establish lives that are dimensional, where the heart dimension is also filled through possibly other people, through things they care about, through causes they're involved in, through animals that they're involved in. We need to not just talk about the effects of this, because they are disastrous. And I think most people who are listening to this are aware of that and or have it in their lives. But what can we do with it? How can
What you can do with it is to train to get coherent through either meditation or reconnection to the divine, or praying, or being in nature, or doing breathing techniques. The Heart Institute teaches many breathing techniques and gives you the possibility to get coherent yourself.
Thank you, because we need to talk about what people...
And we even have machines to measure it if you want to monitor
it. Yeah.
And so you get independent of an animal, you get independent of a mother, a father, or another person. You can get coherent in yourself. And once you feel the state again, and you feel this inner happiness which is not connected to any outer part, then you can begin to share it, because first time in your life you have the cake and you can actually split it.
This is true, although a lot of people try and do that before they start loving themselves. And I think part of it does have to do with coming back to accepting yourself as who you are. And if you only define yourself through the effects you have on other people, there's an empty space within that's not getting fed, and
that's not a coherent state then.
But that's why we speak about these things. You all have different experiences, and so I'm very interested to see and to hear how you guys work with that. I agree with Marianne and everything she's saying, with particularly with the breath, with meditation in whatever form you use it, with having a purpose of connecting to other living beings, no matter what they are. But what
In
can
one
we
of our last academy sessions, we came to the conclusion, treat yourself as someone you love.
exactly? Thank you. That's wonderful. I'm going to write that one down.
And it's not so easy.
No, that's not so easy at all. So I have a slightly different take on all of this. And I think a lot of the suffering that we're talking about here with separation anxiety and so on relates to, I understand it's a bit heady, what I'm about to talk about, but it's this issue of needing another person to define you in the first place. So these young mothers that I'm talking about who have got these little children that they cannot cope with, and they've got all of the separation anxiety, they've got all of this trauma sitting around the children. The problem is that they're looking for the child to define themselves. So it's the way that the identification, as Gautama Buddha would talk about, is based on, I need that child to define me. So I'm reliant upon them to do that type of thing. And so in an easier way to think about it, we would say, well, how about actually defining ourselves? But we know that that's only the first step. And then the second step would be to not need to be defined at all. So, Kacy, what you're talking about there, and Marianne, with this business of needing to be the person, or the person that you would love, I think was was very, very nice the way that you're talking about it. But how about we actually head in the direction that we don't need to be loved by anybody? We don't need to love ourselves. We can participate in love if we wish to. And we certainly don't need to, as a first step, we don't need anybody else to actually define us. So I would work with people in that way, continuously. And I know it's a contrarian type of approach, but the difficulty is that it's still trauma. To actually need to love yourself is a trauma response, and it's a trauma in itself. It's actually a creation of trauma, and what's intriguing is that we can have better experience, like all of these things that we're talking about. They lead to a much better experience for the person, but it's not the answer, in my opinion. The answer is for it to be irrelevant whether somebody loves you or not, or whether you love yourself or not. It should become completely irrelevant.
I don't know if I agree with you, Neil, although I find it very interesting, and I really appreciate that you put this out. I suppose because I see us as beings in relationship. Even God needs us to experience him, her, or itself, however you choose to define it. We do define ourselves in relation. Okay, this is great. I love it. Neil, thank you for bringing this up, because these are things that, yes, it becomes very interesting to talk about, because my concept of definition, I think it does have to do with relationship to others, but it starts with my relationship to myself and to whatever my concept of God is without defining that. And you have a completely different take on it. It's fascinating. Please say more about it.
Well, it's almost as though, Kacy, you're taking us in two different directions at the same time, because I am God.
I understand that. I am also God.
I'll let you vibe with that. Yeah.
Neil, I wanted to say something there. When after you spoke, or when you speak about the way you see it, you take pressure off. It's a new way of looking at it, and I like it. You take pressure because it's all about, yes, you have just being okay for what it is and what you are. This is basically what I get.
Just to be would be
Just to be.
the thing that comes out of that. And I've got to do a prayer. I'm sorry, I've got another appointment I've got to go to now. But this is such a fascinating conversation. I got to thank you all for having me here today, and it's been fabulous to listen to what you're saying. But there's more to this topic we can talk about, I'm sure, at some point.
Neil, thank you for showing the diversity of approaches to this. I appreciate it, and I appreciate what you're saying, and I want to hear more about it because I don't know if I agree with it or not because I don't really get it yet. Thank you.
Even if
Okay,
you
thank you,
look
everybody.
okay, bye, Neil. Even if you look at coherence, you can say and interpret it as love, but it doesn't need to be. It's only coherence. It is about heart thinking.
Yes.
And then we might interpret it as loving or being loved, but this is an interpretation. It is the thinking of the hearts and the thinking of the heart rate variability, which gives you this safety, which gives you this inclusive world as you had with the mother in the arm or being breastfed. It gives you this haven. And we interpret the experience of that haven as love or being loved, but it's an interpretation. As far as that, I absolutely agree with me. But I think if we can get, if we could shed all of our views, our misconceptions, our belief systems, then there would be nothing left but this state of being connected, which we then really might call love. But I think this is the samadhi state then.
I was about to ask that. It sounds like the samadhi state. Yeah. But once again, you can't live in that. I'm sorry, we live on this earth. The samadhi state is, let's say symbolically, a mountaintop that we can visit. Many of the yogis have visited it, the Buddhists, the people who are highly religious, the people who are highly aware, developed, but we don't live on the top of the mountain. We live down here. And it's important that we know the mountaintop is there. And if we are blessed, we have even experienced being there in moments of true connection. But I'm sorry, we live here and we have relations that we have to deal with and not. So I can't even say that the majority of people have that experience of having been accepted and loved as children, because as they say, we are all emotional cripples who were raised by emotional cripples. And part of growing up and becoming an adult is of letting that go. I am the way I am because my mom, my dad, my uncle, my aunt, and at some point, part of growing up is that, yes, that is my past. I want to work with the areas that I have been harmed and or crippled and or have reactions that do not bring me that which I wish. That's part of becoming accepting of ourselves once again. But we live in a hard world. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Yay.
Just let me shortly answer Kacy, and then I want to greet Zach and inform Zach about what we did. Kacy, for just one moment, try to imagine that we are not all crippled, but that we are all healed.
I agree. We're in process of healing, and that's what
but just for a moment, imagine that's already done. We are all healed. We are all connected. We are all in this coherent, vibrant connection with each other. What wonderful paradise would that be?
Visions are important, and many communities have striven to develop that within groups.
I still think it's possible. Call me maniac, but I still think it's possible. It's the end of the development, might be.
Well, when that's ready, then I'm ready to go into heaven, but I want to come with the last one. Yeah?
Okay, it's okay.
I'm going to join in with the last one to be able to get there. Because our work is here reminding people of that. I agree. But we remind people of that. And animals remind people of that. And when people have had lacks as children and they are totally focused on having a person or an animal that they sleep with, that's enough for them because that gives them what they lacked. Yeah.
That gives that state, yes.
It gives that sense. And it's a reminder of what is good. But then every morning we wake up and we deal with other people, and our job is to help people be able to do it as positively as possible. But I would like to give some space. I'm so glad that you've come now.
Thank you. We are greeting Zach from Kenya. Zach, we have been talking about separation anxiety, of the symptoms of separation anxiety, and we tracked separations and anxiety down to a childhood trauma where you're either not connected to the parents or the parents couldn't connect to you. And I just wanted to hear your African point of view on separation anxiety and how African societies experience that. Is it there? Is it not there?
At least in your culture, because African society is A to Z plus.
Oh, but Zach is very connected.
Okay. First, thank you very much for having me. And I must start by apologizing for coming an hour late. I had informed Marianne. I go to church on Sunday, and usually our church ends at around 12. So by the time I drive back home, it's a few minutes later. So I just wanted, I saw the topic of today's discussion, and I wanted to have settled down in a place where I can really absorb it all in and just think about separation and what it really means. Because I will talk briefly about separation from my experience of work that I did and have been doing for years now around supporting orphaned and vulnerable children. And between 2018 and 2018 November and 2023, around June, I was working for an organization called Lift the Children. And this work was very interesting because it put me in a situation where I was overseeing close to 80 children homes, children orphanages. And part of my work was to visit and assess new children orphanages and onboard them for funding and onboard them for support. So my typical day-to-day work was to visit these children orphanages or children homes, to spend time with the people who are managing them and understand the everyday operations, do a lot of capacity building for them to be able to care for the children, and to just provide avenues that they can be able to offer service to the kids in a better way. And there was always one thing that I observed, and if you have an opportunity maybe one day to visit Kenya or Africa, or be in a place where there are children institutions, otherwise called orphanages, if you visited, you will, there was something we observed that is called attachment disorder. And the children, especially those who are rescued as when they were very young, and they had experienced different kind of trauma or violence around them. And really there was absence of caring adult people in their lives. When you come to the facility, there's always this one child who runs into your arms and they immediately sort of fall in love with you. And they want you to carry them, they want you to pamper them, they want you to just, embrace them, and they will clutch onto you. And when you are leaving, they will cry and wail, and they will be very, very sad that you are leaving. And in many occasions, if it's your first time to visit such a facility, you will often feel guilt that you are leaving this child behind, that this child is really connected to you, that this child, has this special bond. As I read more materials later, I realized people will even go on to adopt such children. People will even go on to, sponsor such children, support such children a little bit more. But as I continue to work and continue to interact with children, I realized when you leave, this child will do the same to the next adult person who will come in the facility. And they'll keep doing that because they are really trying to find that which is missing. And unfortunately, because we are visiting only for a few hours, we are visiting maybe only for a day, we are only able to give that little emotion attachment for an hour or 2 or 3. And it becomes difficult for that particular child because then they keep looking for it over the years from all the many people who visit that facility. So you'll find some younger girls, like young girls or small children who are female, will tend to more get attached to adult male adults. They will be more drawn towards male adults. You'll find younger boys being tending to be attached to more female adults. And of course, that has its own downsides where you'll find in cases where there are no proper protection systems, you find such children becoming prone to abuse and even being violated, because then they give themselves wholly to this adult person in trust and in hope that they receive that love and care and protection from this particular adult. But in many cases also we have seen adults taking advantage of that and exploiting children and abusing them. So I learned a lot in terms of what separation means. And in a typical African society, before missionaries came to Kenya, and sorry, the noise in the background is my son pushing his chair around the house. I hope that doesn't interfere with what I'm saying. So what we see a lot is before missionaries came in Africa, and all colonialism and post-colonialism, there was nothing like children being separated from their families. Children institutions and children orphanages do not exist in African setup before missionary work. And why is that? The reason is because there were cultural guardrails that ensured that children grew up in loving families. So typically what will happen is, if I died, and sometimes people will say, this is a backward culture, it doesn't have any good, it victimizes women. But technically, if I died in the traditional African setup, and I have my wife and we have 3 kids together, to avoid a situation where my wife is not able to take care of the kids, and then they have to be separated and go and live somewhere else where they can be provided, the culture demanded that my brother, one of my brothers or one of my kinsmen, inherit my wife. And when they inherit my wife, she lives within the confines of our family. And that way my kids will be taken care of by my brother or my fellow kinsmen who have related bloods, and they have responsibility from a societal perspective to provide for these children, to be the father figure, to be the mother figure, to ensure that the bond that that I as a father should have provided when I was alive, my brother has to continue to do that and to play that role until when those kids become older. Now, in the context of wife inheritance, there were positives, there were negatives, and the whole issue was really when my brother in this case inherits my wife, he inherits also the property that I have, and the essence of that is to use these properties to raise resources to continue to provide for my kids and continue to make my household productive, so that then the kids are cared for and they're provided for in a way that they will grow up in a responsive environment and they're not separated from that particular environment. But then fast forward comes the missionaries, and we have now later on in 1990s, mid-1990s, we have the increase of HIV/AIDS and the spread of HIV/AIDS, and it's now rendering wife inheritance to be something that is not desired, because then it's contributing to spread of HIV/AIDS, and at that time there were no alternatives. And what happens actually, the first children orphanage in Kenya is traced in around 1950s, when Kenya is just starting to prepare to become independent, and there are children who have been given birth by the soldiers and the militaries and the people who came here with the colonialisms, and they have intermarried, or they engaged in sexual activities with the locals, and they gave birth to children considered to be not wanted. They are not whites, and they are not blacks, so technically they belong to no one. No one wants to claim them. So we are seeing the first sort of orphanage being created to take care of these unwanted children. So they have a facility where then someone starts to provide care for them. They're literally children of the soldiers, but given birth by the local indigenous mothers. So this has then evolved to a place where these institutions have been entrenched as part of the society in Kenya. And the damage that it has done to children, because then people are pulling children from their families to go and live in these facilities out of because of poverty, because of different family circumstances. And you find many research, if you read online, will show that children who live in these facilities, their mental growth, they're affected psychologically. When they become adults, they deal with a lot of trauma. They are not able to, make even simple decisions, because then they live in an institution where it's not designed as a typical family, where things will sort of just take care of themselves naturally, because of the rules in the institution, because of the environment in the institution, because of the caregivers in the institution who are mostly motivated with other things beyond natural care for children. Those children tend to be denied natural process of growth. So those are challenges around separations, and this then happens in a way that when I take away, I just want to give this last scenario. When you have a single mom who is taking care of her 3 kids or 4 kids, and then you come in and you say, okay, we see you are suffering. We would like to, take your kids, take them somewhere else and be able to provide for them. We have seen that in many cases, when you separate the mother from the children, the mother becomes less and less responsible. She gives them away, and she feels part of her is now relieved. In some cases, they react by going to be involved by other men and giving birth to more children, because then they feel that they need these children in their lives. So a lot of the basic responsibility of providing for her children, when it's taken away, denies her an opportunity to be the mother. And in many cases, we have seen people preferring to suffer together, mothers preferring to be with their children despite what happens. And sometimes it's us, the outsiders, who come in such a space, and instead of intervening in a way that unites them more and helps them grow together even much better, what we do is, our quick solution is to separate them. So have the children come and live with me in the orphanage, so that I can be able to take care of them. And then you leave the mother alone with sadness and loneliness and feeling incapable and feeling that she's such a terrible mother. And many years down the line, children grow up with resentment that their mother gave them up, that their parents gave them up, their parents didn't want them, what they were rejected. Such like things, they become, while we took them there to be assisted, they become angry with their society, that their society abandoned them. Their society didn't see anything good of them. And even when they're integrated back into the communities and into the society, there is always this tension between them and society. Like, you gave me away, you didn't want me, so how do I build this relationship into adulthood? So I think I just learned too much around how separation, especially at early age, when it comes to children, do have a bearing later on in their lives, in the sense of how they interpret the world around them. And unfortunately, the sad thing is with the orphanages, some of the orphanages, the environment are not very stable, and things change and fluctuate very, very fast. And then the child has to change and fluctuate in her mind or in his mind very, very fast. The example I usually give is, if today, if I had a challenge of paying my rent in my house, there's possibility that my 9-year-old, 5-year-old, and 1.5-year-old, they will not know that I'm having an issue paying rent for the house they live in. I will do everything to shield them from the immediate pressure that comes with that kind of a feeling. But if we are in an orphanage and we are 50 of us or 49 of us, and there's no money, there's no provision, the children will immediately be exposed to the stresses that come with that kind of a thing, because then the owner of the orphanage is stressed up trying to look for money to take care of all these children. And you find that then children who live in such an environment are constantly facing the reality of, if there is no money of this, if there's lack, then there is immediate suffering. Without human emotions and human ability to shield them and understand that these are young ones and they don't have capacity to comprehend the whole concept around lack and things not being available and how you navigate that until when they're at the right time when they can be able to start to make decisions. So this is just a concoction of many different things I've learned, but I'll pause there for now.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
And definitely the African society was working very good before the missionaries came.
Mm.
And then it all started, and we got this separation problem in the society. It's very interesting. And what you're telling about the orphanages, where the children are immediately exposed to the lack of money, lack of food, and anything, whereas parents would shelter, the same happens in animal shelters. When there's not enough food, if there's not enough money, the animals are immediately exposed to that stress. Whereas when we look at sanctuaries, there the humans shield the animals from having that stress. And so they can build human-animal interactions, which in shelters barely is possible. So orphanages resemble in some way animal shelters, and I never did get that connection before. It's a sad thing what we are doing there. Very sad thing. It's not reasonable.
Yes.
Not the animal shelters and not the orphanages. Not reasonable.
Yes, and for with all respect to people who do this kind of work, they really want to, they do it with good heart. They really see the suffering of the children in the streets, lack of care and attention, and they really want to, step forward and be able to help. Unfortunately, the way the economics around it work is, if you have a few more children, you are likely to raise a few more resources that is then, enables you to be able to take care of all the children. And that's where the temptation is, because the more you expand the orphanage, the way I've written about this, an article about this, is there's a temptation to have more kids so that then you have more funding and you have more support, because for the people who support these kinds of institutions, they don't look at deepened support, they look at expanded support. So if someone is supporting one child, they don't want to support that child in a deeper way. They want to support another child and another child and another child. And by so doing, they are moving one caregiver who is caring for 2 children. They are giving all the attention to those 2 children and building a lot of attachment, a lot of support, a lot of care. But if you give if you increase that number from 2 to 12 to 15, then it becomes harder for the caregiver to give the same amount of love and care and support to 15 and 20 and 30. So it means the 20th child is far away from the center of love and care and support from the one caregiver. And technically, that's the caregiver becomes stressed. And when they become stressed, because then they are hearing not 2 cries anymore, they are hearing 20 cries. They have to do not 2 diapers anymore, they have to do 20 diapers. That causes a lot of stress to the caregiver. And what you think as someone who runs that facility is, let me employ another caregiver. And when you bring in a new caregiver, this is a new person that has then to build a new relationship that has to start. The children have to become familiar. And then because of that stress, the caregiver is not happy with the salaries they are getting, because then more work but less pay. Then they resign and leave. And when they leave, you have to hire another person. And this new person has to build new relationship. And the cycle just keeps going on and canceling itself, and the children become sort of a ping pong. They are moving between one person, and then he's here for a few months, and then they have to leave, and then they have to come back, and then there's a new person. And all these people bring different environment, different atmosphere. If you compare it to my child, who is 9 or 10, and they have grown since day one with me. I'm always present as their father, and their mother is always present. They just know these 2 characters. If we have our shortcomings, they know. If we yell, they know. They can predict. They can look at our faces, and they can be able to tell when we are not happy, when we are stressed, when we are angry, because they have been doing it for a period of years. Until when they turn 18, this has been a very predictable environment that as adults, they expect now to start to make their own decisions, but they have grown up in a predictable environment that they are able to start to make their own world around some of these principles. So even if they decided to let go one aspect, or not follow one principle that we might have lived by, they are doing so out of choice that they have understood. But a child who did not develop that pattern, and they had so many things going on, there were changes, there were this, there were this, is really like doing a subject, and that doing different subjects, and those subjects are taught by different people at different times, at all the times, and then an exam comes and you can't really think. So they're asking you to answer depending on the character of the teacher who taught you, and you can't really say, do I use this character, or do I use this character, or which character do I apply in this particular circumstance? So you find separation goes beyond the idea of just living in a space and then being removed for a while. What are the elements happening in that, and how are they affecting the emotional, the psychological well-being of the people in that particular space? Sometimes we get comfortable because then we are in a familiar ground. I believe even now, if Marianne was no longer the host and there was another host, we will feel a sense of separation from this show, because we have then to adjust our minds to the new host, and the new host will come with different style, will look at things differently, will question differently, will argue differently, and that will cause stress in us. So you can imagine if we as adults will experience stress in such a case, how about children? Those are just things that go through my mind.
Exactly, I'm intrigued because it's absolutely the same in animal shelters. People take in more and more animals to get more and more funds, and they can care less and less, and they have the fluctuation of caregivers, they have the fluctuation of volunteers, and the animals suffer tremendously, and it's nothing but insecurity that is left.
True, but it's not an answer to change that, whether it's orphanages or the animal shelters. You have to go to a completely different level. People, I mean, unfortunately, through COVID, a lot of people got animals because they were at home and they all tossed them out. In Spain, when it's hunting season, right beforehand, they breed all these dogs, and then you have thousands of dogs with children. The women get pregnant. One, it has to do with, of course, a lack of contraception, but it's also, how do you tie a man to you? As you say, if the woman has children in an orphanage and she's out on her own and she finds another partner who's potential, what will she do? In order to keep the relationship, she will get pregnant because it's how she survives. And all of these kids growing up in the orphanages, they grow up to be adults. And then they get taken out of the orphanages without the possibility of good work. It's a cycle. We have to look at different places to be able to work with this situation. With the animal shelters, I mean, it's catastrophic all over the world because people wanted the connection. They have animals, all of that. And then they think of them as things. And it's disastrous. But changing the animal shelters, changing the orphanages is not going to help. The problem lays elsewhere. It lies with the need of people and the fear of them being alone. And of course, in Africa, in different countries in Africa, you have the fact that war has taken complete generations. Illness has taken complete generations, particularly of men. And the women who are there have been raped or have been in relationships where children are the security. They have many children so that hopefully one will live and supply them with food. We have different places to work with. This is a much larger situation. And I have so much respect for the fact that you work with this. They say it's to kill a dragon is sort of the sign of a hero, but to get up every day and work on situations that don't seem to have answers, that's where real heroism is. And that's what you're doing and the work with you do with the children. You know that that work is not the answer because more and more children will come. And the system grows and it's not working and it's not satisfying, but you have to go elsewhere to change that. And change in society, change in human beings and how they relate to each other, because every single person has a part of their brain that says, you are the one who has to survive. So we have to work with more dimensionality.
Yeah, but it comes down to building connections.
It does.
Whether it's human animal or human human or animal animal, the security we experience derives from that connection.
True, but
if we only provide food and a roof on the head and maybe a bit of education, that doesn't give the connection and it doesn't give the stability and it doesn't build a society.
Absolutely. It's a question of building awareness of what the situations are. I live in Germany, but I look at my country and I'm appalled at the lack of consciousness. I cannot say anything about Africa, period. I have no experience whatsoever there. But once again, you have complete cultures that are dysfunctional these days, and there's a lack of understanding of how things work. And this has to do with education, but it has to do with an education also of the soul, of the heart, of an understanding how everything works together, and a willingness to choose to not do certain things because it's beneficial to us as a whole. But we don't have that consciousness anymore. We only have the consciousness of me. That's difficult.
This is why we were talking about the samadhi.
Absolutely.
The samadhi state where we feel this interconnectedness. And it's so nice that Socrates came.
Yes, it is. I love it. All of your cats, when they come, they immediately go here.
It's and he's showing what connection is, and he's giving a lot at the moment.
This is true.
And as you see, he's totally clinging to my heart and wants to get me focused on him and getting coherent with him. Because this is where he, as a former stray animal, gets the security from.
That's true. The place where the children get security from is to have some person there who relates to them. And I understand exactly what you're saying about when you go to an orphanage or you go to a place where children are needy, they have all of these loose connections, emotional connections, and any place they think they might hook onto, they got it. Except that it gets cut off again, and then they're doing the same. And when they get old enough, they will have children because they want the connection. And we are getting up every day and working with things that are impossible to cure. And yet there's no other way for us except to do that.
And Kacy, even that is mirrored in an animal shelter. Even there is this one animal that immediately comes to the foreigner.
This is true.
And these animals are prone to be abused.
The animals choose also, but not everyone can do it. The children choose also, but you can't take every child.
But it's very interesting how it mirrors. I never thought of that before, but it's actually the same thing, and it shows us really what Priya said in the beginning. We have an animal nature that wants to have this social connection. Maybe if you're very highly developed, you can be the hermit up in the Himalayan mountains. But you have to have a very, very intense connection to the divine then to be happy.
I still think you cannot live at the top of the mountain. We live in the mud down here.
Yeah, you know, those people, they don't eat, they don't drink, they are just with the divine. It's okay for them.
Yeah, and in the world in general, they're the exception. They show us that there's a top of a mountain.
Yeah.
But those of us who fight every day to one person after another to make it easier for them to live a positive life.
Yeah,
that's what our work is, and it's work every day.
Make it possible, yeah.
I'm sure you get up every day and realize that the work you're doing is impossible to fix, and yet you go out there and you do it. You can't fix those children. You can't fix that system. And yet you're working hard because your heart cries out to you and says, this is work that is of value. And it's the work you've chosen to do.
Yeah, and there is always a temptation to fix every problem with either throwing money on it or legislating and making a law. And there is a place where money stops and real connection starts. There is a place where the law stops and the actual human to human connection starts. And I think for every kind of conflict that has been resolved successfully, it has not been because of the money. It has not been because of the law or the war. It has been solved the point where all those have failed, and now it is the relationship of human to human. The point where people have decided to become human to each other and have been able to start to talk and communicate. Now, in that sense, usually what I have seen when they are negotiating for peace or things like this, they will take these people in a place where they're just two of them or three of them, and there is really nothing else in that space. It can be in an open field, it can be, and you are told to look at each other in the eye and start to think, start to see each other as human beings, start to connect. And I think the idea of us reaching a place where we can be able to find solutions is not really thinking about it from a legal perspective. Like in Kenya right now, they are implementing what they are calling care reform strategy. And care reform strategy is looking to phase out the children orphanages by 2032. That all children should now live within their families and within their communities. That's very good. They have actually started a lot of initiatives and processes to sensitize why it's good to live in the community and in the families, because traditionally that is what has happened. But then there are a lot of questions from the people who have been running the orphanages, and they are genuine questions in terms of, what do we do to a child who was raped by the father? Do we take them back to their father? What do we do to a child who was abandoned 2 years old, 1 year old, or a few days old? We don't know who threw them away. What do we do? Where do we reintegrate them back to? When the kids go back to communities and in families, what happens if they face rejection? What happens if the rejection is coming from the child? Because then we are assuming that by us taking them back, they will be accepted, they will be welcomed.
They're an X amount to feed. I'm sorry. We're talking about existential things, and you cannot do have one treatment for everyone. You have to see situation is, and that's exhausting work for you and for those who work
Yeah,
with
so the idea is, how do we expand that in terms of when we are thinking about what connects the families, what brings them together? What do they value? What are their value systems? What do they find to be very important that can supersede everything else that we are thinking? And that can be a point for them to connect. So I have seen a number of proposals and suggestions on how that can be achieved. But the way Kacy is saying, the idea is there is no one solution fits all when we are dealing with the idea of separation and the idea of uniting. There's actually another aspect that I wanted to share about that I have found to be very interesting. I work a lot in the community, and I find myself employing different kinds of people, and I've seen the issue of gender-based violence sometimes threatening to wipe out lives. So I have had situations where some of the people I work with on my team, you will see a woman coming in the school to teach or to do work, but her face is swollen. She has been beaten up by the husband. And immediately, the nature of me is I want to help her. I want to, help her get out of that relationship and be safe. And I have conversations with them. I invite them, and one of the questions I ask them a lot is, you don't value yourself? Do you have value for yourself? You're going to die, Can you think about yourself first? And they'll go something like, yeah. And then I've even proposed that I'm going to find a house for you, rent a house for you so that you can stay safer away from that man. Get your sense of self-worthiness. You do not deserve this. But then they will go back home and they come back the following day and they have changed their mind. They don't want to, go live alone.
Also, they're
They
also
say this is
afraid. Yeah.
Yes, they're also afraid. They feel, and of course, there's also the societal pressure when they go to their in-laws, when they go back to their parents, and they say this is happening, and the parents say, "Oh, that's how marriage is. So you should
Exactly.
hold on." And then
They
I
experience
meet
with children often.
yes,
And
yes,
that's
and then I meet them and I say, "No, that's not what marriage is about. You are supposed to be cared for." So it looks like you are running against the terrain. You are running against what the society has created to be the norm. So there is an urge to separate yourself and be free and be peaceful. But there's also an urge of belonging, an urge of identity that I'm a married woman. I have a family of my own. I have my homestead. I have, I am able to run my own home. And then there's a feeling that I'm suffering in this particular situation and I need to move away. So you look at it and you see the contradiction in terms of wanting to belong, but also wanting, to be alone so that you are safe. And I think when we've been thinking about that, and I've been discussing with many people, and one of the things that I say constantly is we need to look at sometimes when we are dealing with cultural challenges, it's quick to think it's men who are the problem. And of course, focus all our campaign and all our, our material and target and messaging to men. But then we tend to forget that when women receive an idea and they embrace it, to undo that idea from their mind can take a generation because it forms it forms their belief system. It forms their value system. So one example we usually give is the idea of FGM, female genital mutilation. It's a culture that is perpetuated across Africa in some communities. And many times the women do it at night on their girls. They're the ones, the women are the ones who are going, the only thing that the man will say is, I will not marry an circumcised woman. And then the woman will literally take it upon herself to find her daughter, find her the other person's daughter, and they will carry them in darkness. They will go in secret places, and they will be the one performing the female genital mutilation on the girls.
Yes.
It's like the women become the carrier of that. And unless you focus your communication and your campaign to them to undo that, they feel if we don't do it, then we will not belong. Our daughters will not get married, we will not get the respect we deserve. So to a large extent, they are doing it for themselves as women. But then
I'm sorry, there are no easy answers on that particular topic.
Exactly.
Yes, the women are doing it. Yes. And it has to do with things. It was done to me, and I am alive, and I had children. And it's very complicated, but you can't just say it's because of the women. I'm sorry. It's
exactly.
No. I think
that's
we
why
need to
that's why I'm saying
something.
Yes, that's why I'm saying it's not women, it's not men. It is a combination of different factors that if you don't look at them carefully and engage in the society, you will not be able to understand who do I need to sensitize? Because if we spend time sensitizing the women and helping them understand that even though this was done to you, you do not have to carry it to the next generation. You have to be empowered enough to be able to ensure that then you become the end of it. And we start to move towards harmony and peace, So this is the empowerment that needs to be there to be able to deal with issues that cause separation. Because then when they do this and their girls become angry and run away, there is a lot of separation that happens in the family, because then the girl feels that the mother wanted to betray her, the father wanted to betray her, the father feels angry that the family has been dishonored, the woman feels that my daughter has let me down, and all this, the anger starts to flare. So how do we build harmony that then leads to a place where the three parties in this particular situation, the woman, the girl, the daughter, the father, coexist in a way that rejects this particular practice that is bound to create separation, that is bound to bring suffering, that is bound to bring an environment that there is no disharmony, because then that leads to separation. How do we build them in a way that they are at peace with each other without someone feeling that you are the cause of my problem, or I'm the cause of my problem? So this is not one system of one solution. It's a combination of we people who intervene in the community, and as we deal with cultural aspects that lead to disharmony and disunity and leads to separation, to carefully interrogate between the lines and see how do we tailor our message to all the parties that are involved in such a way that then it brings harmony and it brings peace and reduces possibility of separation.
Yes, I think Veronika is very right. It's a very complex topic. And if we are going deeper there, we need to differentiate between dependency, relationship, and connection.
And power.
Because if we would be really connected, we wouldn't do it.
Yes.
But if we are dependent.
In other cultures, that is not true. They feel that it.
Kacy, please hear me out. Don't stop me. Don't jump in while I'm speaking. Please. So if we only have relationships without connection, only contracts, if we have dependency in relationships, we can do any mental things, we can come from belief systems, and then we would venture on hurting others, which we never would do if we would be really interconnected, if we would really feel the other person. And so I think we should strive and enhance the connection and a bit forget about relationship and dependencies. All our social contracts, all our family building is built on dependency and relationship and not on connection. But this is, I think, a topic for another live talk. And I thank you very much for participating. May I ask for your final words so that we can close? Who wants to start?
I would like to start. What was on my chest while you spoke? My African brother is, I've been in Ghana for so many years and visited rural communities, the villages, and I saw the beautiful, simple life of the Africans where the babies are being born in the small clay houses, sometimes without a doctor, and the mother has the instinct to do it all by herself, and the baby is growing up wrapped around her, being carried around. And these are the most strongest and healthiest people at the end. Mm-hmm. And if we human beings less interfere with nature, there would be less of the anxiety problems. And it's the same thing with animals. I'm having this animal haven and animal sanctuary. We do things as natural as possible. And we let them live in a herd, and we let them live as simple as possible. And I think the same thing, it's for humans too. Do you agree?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah, I think actually Veronika has made a very good point that a lot of problems that we see are as a result of human interference in what should be just natural processes that should be left to take their course. And I want to agree that even as we evolve as society, Africa, we are standing in a very difficult place where we want to follow the natural process of evolution of our societies, but there is globalization that is just there with us, and there are constantly new ideas that are being introduced in our ecosystem, impurities that allow us to jump certain processes that allow, sometimes it's like you are being told to move very, very fast than your capacity to carry those things. And this is all because of, again, either Africa is a market of 60 billion people, or 5 billion people, or 4 billion people, or 2 billion people. When we start to count people and quantify them and see them as a market segment, as this, as that, then we lose the whole idea of humanity and how we should connect and let things roll out. But again, they say for the sake of advancement and for the sake of quality of life and for the sake of peace, or for the sake of this, then there needs to be these interventions. I think what I will leave the audience to ponder about is to what extent can we intervene in these processes without hurting the very aspect of things that we are trying to purport to correct. To what extent can we intervene without killing human beings, without putting them in a situation where they have to make hard choices? Yes, intervention is necessary in many other different processes, but are we hurting that which we are trying to bring to life in the process of intervention?
Thank you very much. Kacy?
I think it's crucial that we have people who have chosen to, how can I say it, live in a more connected and separate life. I live in the middle of a city, and I think the most important thing is to be able to continue to be in dialogue with other people, to have places like what you have, Marianne, a sanctuary, or I find, Veronika, what you have, because both of you provide healing, both for the animals and for those people who come. Marianne, you have your volunteers. Veronika, you have people who work with you, who come and who here and there do different projects, whatever. You provide an example that it can happen. And it's important to know that it's possible. The dialogue's important. To be able to speak with people who experience life differently and who have the opinion that being able to do things the way I think it should be done is the most important thing in the world, and that they're willing to trample on other people to do that. We have to keep in dialogue, and we have to do it in such a way that people don't get more extreme in their their insistence upon their own opinions, which is why this kind of talk with people from different parts of the world with different experiences is so important. So I'm very grateful for that. And I'm also grateful that I can say, I see it completely differently. Could you say more about that? And to have someone else be able to do it, I hope that at some other point we'll continue to do that. Because as we're saying things, it doesn't mean that we all think it's correct. What you are experiencing in Kenya, for example, it's a completely different cultural background with completely different religious aspects, which also take place having to do with the mutilation of women. And it's none of these issues are easy, none. And yet, if we become so secure in our own opinions and secure in our way of seeing it, without understanding how radically different each one of us lives in our own universe, then we lose the ability to at least open people up to different ways of thinking. There are things that I'm very energetic on, and I have people in my own family or my neighborhood who are very energetic and whatever, and I have to remind myself constantly to respect other people, and yet to continuously be opening the door to a different way of looking at life. A lot of respect for all of the people who try and make this world better. And if there's one thing that's happening, is that everyone who joins these talks is trying to make their world or the world of other people around them better. And so I can only say I honor that, and thank you all for coming, and I hope that we continue the dialogue. We have to include.
Definitely, we will continue the dialogue.
Thank you for providing.
And, as you said, righteousness and being right is not what we are looking for. Mm-hmm. Open communication is the first step towards connection, but real connection is this what would end our.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And facilitates the healing most of us are looking for. Mm-hmm. So I'm very happy to have you again here in 4 weeks or something, when we take up the next topic of anxiety. And I hope that the more we talk about anxiety, the less anxiety we will have in the world.
Or that people will at least get a sense that there are ways to deal with it better. That's the main thing.
Okay, thank you very much, and have a nice Sunday, all of you.
Have a wonderful month until we see each other again.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.